Love is miserable. I think I'll be a bachelor and I'll swing and I won't fall in love. I'll just be loveful, be kind and good and have fun.
Marvin Gaye had the voice of an angel, but let's be real, he didn't always play nice in the music sandbox. Behind the smooth vocals and soulful hits, Marvin had opinions, and today, we're spilling the tea on the 5 artists he straight up couldn't stand. Buckle up. From DC to the Air Force. Before Marvin Gaye was seducing radios across America with "Let's Get It On," he was just a kid growing up in a neighborhood so rough, his friends called it Simple City. Not because life was easy, but because it was a whole mess of city meets country chaos. Born April 2nd, 1939, in Washington, D.C., Marvin Pence Gaye Jr. didn't start out in the spotlight. His first crib, a public housing complex that had more broken down shacks than working light bulbs. Marvin's early life wasn't exactly a Motown fairy tale. His dad was a minister with a strict streak that bordered on terrifying. If Marvin blinked the wrong way, he'd get a beating. He once said living in his dad's house felt like being ruled by a moody king, one who didn't believe in mercy or boundaries. His sister later said the abuse went on for years, starting when Marvin was just 7. The only relief came from his mother, Alberta, who encouraged his singing and gave him a reason to hang on. Marvin started flexing those vocal cords at church when he was 4, often singing while his father played piano. He found his first real audience during a school play when he belted out Mario Lanza's "Be My Love" at age 11. After that, people stopped saying, "He's got potential," and started saying, "This kid's got something." It was around this time that Marvin started taking music seriously, because when your home life is hell, music becomes more than a hobby, it's survival. School was another roller coaster. He went from Syfax Elementary to Randall Junior High, where he stood out in the Glee Club. Then he bounced to Spingarn High before settling at Cardozo High School. While there, he joined doo-wop groups like the Dippers and the DC Tones, chasing harmony like it owed him money. But life at home didn't get any easier. His dad kept kicking him out. So eventually, Marvin said, "Forget this," and joined the Air Force at 17. Now, if you think Marvin was flying jets and living his Top Gun dreams, think again. The military had him doing grunt work, and he hated every second of it. He faked being mentally unwell to get out, and it worked. He was discharged with a note from his superior, basically saying, "This guy doesn't do authority. No lies detected." By the time he was back on the streets of DC, Marvin had enough pain, grit, and soul in him to fill a record label's catalog. The stage was set, and the soundtrack of his trauma was ready to make history. The 60s. Before Marvin Gaye became the Prince of Motown, he was getting paid $5 a week to bang drums for other people's hits. Yeah, 5. The man who gave us "Let's Get It On" was out here scraping together paychecks like a background musician in a high school talent show. But let's rewind a bit, because Marvin's rise to fame was anything but smooth. After leaving the military, with what we'll call a creative exit strategy, Marvin linked up with his friend Reese Palmer to form a vocal group called the Marquis. The DC group had a spark and even got the attention of Bo Diddley. Yep, that Bo Diddley. He tried to get them signed, and when that didn't work, he tossed them over to OK Records. They released one single, and it tanked, hard. The Marquis got dropped faster than you can say Wyatt Earp, and Marvin started focusing on songwriting. Things picked up when Harvey Fuqua of the Moonglows brought Marvin and the group to Chicago. Rebranded as Harvey and the New Moonglows, they did background vocals for heavy hitters like Chuck Berry. Ever heard "Back in the USA" or "Almost Grown"? Marvin's voice is in there. In 1960, the group split, and Marvin followed Fuqua to Detroit, where he eventually landed at Motown, though not without some behind-the-scenes deals between Fuqua and label boss Berry Gordy. Now, Marvin wasn't trying to be the next R&B superstar. Nah, he wanted to sing jazz and wear tuxedos like Nat King Cole. His first few records, soft, slow, and completely ignored. Even with a name change, he added the E to Gay to dodge rumors, he couldn't get traction. So he stuck to studio work, drumming for Motown acts while collecting chump change and critiques about his stage presence. Folks said he looked half asleep on stage, and you know what? He kinda was. Then came his first solo hit. In 1962, Stubborn Kind of Fellow started climbing and the hits followed. Hitchhike, Pride and Joy, and the duets with Mary Wells pushed Marvin out front. But most of his early success came from singing what others wrote. He didn't love it, but it paid the bills. That all changed when he teamed up with Tammy Terrell. The chemistry? Off the charts. Together, they released timeless duets like Ain't No Mountain High Enough and You're All I Need to Get By. But the fairy tale crashed when Tammy collapsed on stage and was diagnosed with a brain tumor. Gaye was gutted. He lost his creative spark and started pulling away from the industry. Then came a twist. I heard it through the grapevine. Motown didn't even want to release it at first, but when they did, it exploded. 7 weeks at #1, 4 million copies sold. Suddenly, Marvin Gaye was more than a pretty voice. He was a force, even if he wasn't sure he deserved it. 70s to exile. Marvin Gaye was done. Grief-stricken and exhausted, he had just buried his longtime musical partner and close friend, Tammy Terrell, in March 1970. Losing her hit him like a freight train, and for a minute, it looked like Marvin was ready to walk away from music altogether. At one point, he even considered swapping the mic for a football helmet, trying to join the Detroit Lions. The team politely passed because the last thing they wanted was to be the reason Marvin Gaye broke a rib and missed an album. Good call, because what happened next changed everything. Instead of a jersey, Marvin slipped back into the studio. In June 1970, he walked into Hitsville, USA with a track that would flip the script for soul music. What's Going On wasn't just a song, it was a message. Inspired by police violence and war protests, the track tackled stuff Motown usually avoided. Gordy hated it, said it was too political, too risky. Marvin, he basically said, no release, no more music. Bold move, and it worked. The single dropped in January 1971 and blew up. It crushed the R&B charts, soared up the Hot 100, and sold over 2 million copies. Marvin won that standoff, and the payoff was massive. Motown let him do an entire album his way. 10 days later, What's Going On was finished. Smooth transitions, heavy messages, zero fluff. It became one of soul music's most important albums. It earned Grammy nominations, awards, and a permanent spot in music history. Now, Marvin had leverage. In 1971, he signed a $1 million deal with Motown, record-breaking at the time for a black artist. He started working on follow-up projects, including You're the Man and the Trouble Man movie soundtrack. One was shelved, the other became a top 10 hit. But his real comeback came in 1973 with Let's Get It On. That title track, fire. It hit #1. Won and stayed burned into every slow jam playlist from then on. And Marvin wasn't done pushing boundaries. He supported Maze, helped Diana Ross with a duet album, and proved he could still sell out shows like a pro, earning $100,000 a night at his peak. But it wasn't all spotlight and soul. Financial trouble and addiction followed him into the late 70s. He moved to Europe, ducked the IRS, and tried to find himself again. That's when Midnight Love came into play. Recorded mostly in Belgium, Midnight Love brought us Sexual Healing. This was a song so smooth, it practically came with a dimmer switch. It dominated the charts, won 2 Grammys, and became Marvin's biggest single ever. He said he wasn't making records for fun anymore. He was feeding people's souls, and boy did people eat. His final tour was bumpy. It was troubled by paranoia and health issues, but the legacy was already cemented. Marvin didn't just make music, he made statements, and in a world full of noise, his voice still cuts through. Saying goodbye. April 1st, 1984, wasn't just another Sunday. It was the day music lost one of its most gifted voices in the most tragic and unthinkable way. Marvin Gaye, the man who gave the world What's Going On and Sexual Healing, was killed, not by a stranger, not by an accident, but by his own father. That afternoon, Marvin found himself in the middle of yet another tense fight between his parents inside the family home in Los Angeles. The neighborhood, Western Heights, was supposed to be a peaceful place. But inside the house, peace had left the building a long time ago. Marvin, already emotionally fragile and struggling with addiction, got between his parents during a heated argument. Things escalated fast. It wasn't the first time Marvin had clashed with his father. Their relationship had always been rocky. His father, Marvin Gaye Sr., was known for being strict, harsh, and unpredictable. He was someone Marvin both feared and tried to please his whole life. But this time, the confrontation turned violent. In a matter of seconds, his father shot him twice, once in the chest, right near his heart, and again in the shoulder. It all happened in Marvin's own bedroom at 12:38 p.m. Paramedics rushed him to California Hospital Medical Center, but the damage was too severe. Marvin Gaye was pronounced dead at 1:01 p.m., just one day before his 45th birthday. The news hit like a gut punch. Fans, fellow artists, and the entire music industry were stunned. This was a man who had poured his pain, passion, and politics into every song. And now he was gone, taken by the very person who'd brought him into the world. After his funeral, Marvin's body was cremated, and his ashes were released into the Pacific Ocean. The legend was free at last from the pain he carried for so long. His father was arrested and originally charged with first-degree murder. But after being diagnosed with a brain tumor, the charges were reduced to voluntary manslaughter. He avoided prison, receiving a suspended sentence and probation. He later died in 1998 in a nursing home. And just like that, one of the greatest soul singers in history was silenced. Not by fame, not by scandal, but by family trauma that had been simmering under the surface for decades. It's a story that still doesn't feel real. Marvin Gaye wasn't just another singer. He was the voice of feeling, the sound of vulnerability. He sang about heartbreak, injustice, love, and healing. And in the end, his own life unraveled in a way none of us could have imagined. But here's the thing. Marvin Gaye's legacy didn't die that day. It lives on in every melody, every lyric, and every time someone hits play on Let's Get It On or Mercy Mercy Me. His story may have ended in tragedy, but his music, that's eternal. The List. Turns out, Marvin wasn't just picky about his sound, he was picky about people too. While he kept it cool in public, behind the scenes, totally different vibe. Let's get into the 5 artists that rubbed Marvin the wrong way, and why their names made him want to change the radio station. Teddy Pendergrass. Picture this. You're already a legend, but the spotlight's fading. Your label's not backing you like they used to. Your personal life is in shambles. Then boom, here comes a younger, smoother voice, and people start calling him the next you. That's exactly what Marvin Gaye was dealing with when Teddy Pendergrass exploded onto the scene. To say Marvin took it badly, that's putting it gently. Let's rewind. In the late 70s, Marvin Gaye was going through it, fighting with his record label, spiraling with drug problems, and battling depression that nobody around him really knew how to handle. His album, Hear My Dear, was a raw, emotional tell-all about his messy divorce. It flopped commercially. And while Marvin poured his heart into it, he blamed Motown, especially Gordy, for barely promoting it. Meanwhile, Teddy Pendergrass was soaring. After leaving Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, Teddy's solo career took off. Smooth voice, good looks, swag for days. Fans were obsessed. The media started comparing him to Marvin, calling Teddy the new king of sensual soul. Yeah, Marvin didn't love that. What really lit the fuse? Marvin's own partner, Janice, was stepping out. And not just with anyone, but with Teddy. They weren't exactly hiding it either. Dates, public appearances, the whole nine. And when Marvin spotted them out together at a restaurant, that's when it got real dark, real fast. The jealousy wasn't just personal, it was professional. Marvin even wrote a not-so-subtle track called Ego Tripping Out, poking at Teddy's rising fame. But behind the sass was serious hurt. Marvin felt like everything was slipping. His career, his home, his grip on reality. Janice later shared that being around Marvin was like playing emotional roulette. Some days he was kind, other days scary. He'd disappear, show up high, then vanish again. He'd plan vacations for the whole family, fly out alone, then call Janice to bring the kids. That chaos became the norm. One day, in a drug-fueled rage, Marvin pulled a knife on Janice. She was done. She packed up the kids and left, heading straight to her mother's for safety. Despite everything, Janice didn't paint herself as a victim. She admitted cheating, but said it was revenge for how Marvin treated her. The beef with Teddy didn't stop at music. Marvin reportedly warned Teddy to watch his back if he ever stepped foot in Louisiana. He wasn't joking. Eventually, the heat cooled, Janice and Teddy ended their fling. Marvin and Teddy kept making hits, but the tension never fully went away. Their rivalry was more than egos and charts. It was tangled up in heartbreak, betrayal, and two men fighting to stay on top while their personal lives crumbled. It wasn't just soul music, it was real life, and it got ugly. Lou Rawls. Did you know that Marvin Gaye once felt snubbed by Lou Rawls' Grammy wins? Yep, even soul legends have their sore spots. For Marvin, award season came with a side of resentment. Lou Rawls was known for his smooth as silk vocals and undeniable stage presence. When he began collecting Grammys in the R&B category, it didn't sit well with Marvin. Despite his own groundbreaking albums and emotional depth, Marvin watched as Lou walked away with awards he believed should have been his. It wasn't just about losing, it was about losing in a category that Marvin felt didn't fully capture what he brought to music. While the industry labeled him as R&B, Marvin saw his work as something more, a fusion of soul, protest, passion, and innovation. Being boxed into a single genre felt like an injustice, especially when it came to accolades. There was even a moment where Marvin, half joking and half fuming, said he felt like snatching the Grammy out of Lou's hand on stage. Cooler heads prevailed, but the sting remained. He couldn't ignore the feeling that he was being overlooked in favor of someone he believed hadn't gone as deep creatively or emotionally. Still, Marvin didn't let the bitterness win. He poured his frustration into his music, refining his sound, pushing boundaries, and staying true to his vision. Eventually, all that hard work paid off. When he finally won Grammy Awards for both his vocal and instrumental work, it marked more than just a career milestone. His acceptance speeches were filled with real emotion. He didn't just thank the Academy, he expressed what it meant to be truly seen, especially after years of feeling dismissed. Those awards, even if they were still in the R&B category, symbolized something much bigger: acknowledgement, respect, and validation. And just like that, the rivalry faded into the background. Marvin had nothing left to prove. His artistry had been recognized on the biggest stage, and his legacy as a soul innovator was cemented. So the next time you hear Sexual Healing or What's Going On, remember those weren't just hits. They were part of a journey, a statement, and a victory lap, years in the making. Marvin didn't just earn his Grammys. He fought for them with heart, hustle, and a sound that changed music forever. James Brown. Marvin Gaye was one of soul music's most iconic voices, known for his smooth sound and heartfelt duets. But behind the scenes, there was one figure he refused to associate with. That person was James Brown. And the reason had nothing to do with music competition. It had everything to do with protecting someone Marvin deeply cared about. Tammy Terrell was already a rising star by the time she and Marvin became musical partners. She had started recording songs at just 15 years old and signed contracts that set her on the path to stardom. At 17, she landed what looked like a big opportunity. She joined James Brown's concert tour as one of his backup singers. What should have been a major break quickly turned into a nightmare. Tammy was forced into a relationship with Brown, one that was abusive on multiple levels. Her mother had worried about her young daughter touring with an older man. James Brown's assistant promised she would be safe. But instead of protection, Tammy faced manipulation, control, and violence. Brown used charm at first. He gave her money, gifts, and placed her in luxury hotels. But the truth came out when Tammy's family visited her in New York. They found James Brown in her hotel bed. Her mother expressed concern, but was reassured that everything was under control. Sadly, that could not have been further from the truth. Tammy was being physically assaulted. She returned home after one particularly brutal beating, and her family saw just how much damage had been done. Her sister described how worn down and broken Tammy looked. They even found one of her dresses stained with blood. Tammy wanted to leave the situation, but feared breaking her contract. When she finally left, the trauma stayed with her. She often hid bruises and black eyes, trying to continue her career as best as she could. She confided in Marvin Gaye, who was devastated to learn the truth. Their bond had grown through their music, but this confession brought them even closer. Marvin made a choice that said everything. He kept his distance from James Brown from that moment on. In public, he remained polite, but privately, he drew a clear boundary. Others eventually spoke out. Bobby Bennett from Brown's group confirmed the abuse and shared more disturbing stories, including an incident where Brown reportedly kicked a pregnant girlfriend down a flight of stairs. He also once aimed a firearm at Bobby during a disagreement. Marvin's silent refusal to associate with Brown was an act of protection. He did not need to shout about it. He simply chose not to stand beside someone who had caused so much harm to someone he loved and respected. Tammy's story is not just a tragedy. It is a reminder that even in a world filled with glamour, someone's pain can be quietly hidden. And Marvin Gaye chose to honor that truth by walking away. Rick James. What happens when a fire starter with a super freak attitude sets his sights on the queen of another soul legend? You get one of the messiest love triangles in music history. It all kicked off at the 1983 Grammys. Marvin Gaye had just snatched an award for his steamy hit, Sexual Healing. And the person handing him the trophy was none other than Rick James. While cameras captured the smiles and applause behind the scenes, Rick had his eyes on something other than awards. Or rather, someone. That someone was Janice Gaye, Marvin's estranged wife. Rick called her beautiful, intelligent, and a whole lot of fun. According to him, she liked to party just as much as he did, and he thought they made a great match. The only problem? She was still Marvin's wife. Then again, that never stopped Rick before. Bold was kind of his thing. At the time, Marvin and Jan were living separately, and Rick saw an opportunity. He invited her to his concert at the LA Coliseum, probably thinking it was his big moment. But Jan didn't come alone. She brought her crew. Rick might have expected a romantic night, but Jan kept things on her terms. Still, Rick didn't give up. He saw Marvin slipping from the spotlight and decided he could take his crown. And his queen. He made a move, Jan responded. Before long, the two were involved, and Rick was even flying her to his hometown in Buffalo to meet his mother. That visit should have been a feel-good moment, but drama was right around the corner. The phone rang. On the other end, Marvin. He wanted to talk to his wife. Jan took the call, and after hearing Marvin's voice and demands for her to come home, she told Rick she needed to leave. But Marvin didn't stop at a private phone call. He took it public. He went on the radio and blasted Rick for being with his wife. The fallout was explosive. Jan tried to return to Marvin, but the damage was done. Their relationship never found its way back. Marvin eventually stopped supporting her financially, and Jan was left on unstable ground. Thinking she might still have a future with Rick, she reached out again, but Rick had already moved on. The truth came out. He admitted he was mostly drawn to her because she was Marvin's wife. Once the thrill wore off, so did his interest. Even worse, Jan found herself pulled deeper into Rick's chaotic world. She started helping him with his partying habits, including drugs. What started as a headline-making affair ended in heartbreak and addiction. In the end, Rick James was being exactly who he always was, loud, wild, and ready to stir the pot. But behind the glamour and scandal was a woman caught in the middle, and two men who saw her through the lens of ego and competition. Berry Gordy. Before Marvin Gaye became the voice of social change, he was the golden boy of feel-good soul. But behind the velvet vocals and romantic ballads, Marvin was waging a quiet rebellion, a battle to reclaim his voice, his message, and his artistic freedom. In the early days, Motown Records was like a musical machine, and its mastermind, Berry Gordy, was the man pulling the levers. He turned local talents into global stars, and Marvin was one of his greatest success stories. With a voice that could melt stone, Marvin became a chart topper singing about love, heartbreak, and slow dance fantasies. These songs made people smile, they made money, and they made Gordy very happy. But Marvin wasn't smiling anymore. He was restless. The world outside the studio was changing. Wars were being fought, people were marching, cities were burning, and he felt disconnected, singing only about romance. Inside, Marvin was growing tired of being just a handsome face with a smooth sound. He wanted to sing about what mattered to him: injustice, struggle, the pain of being black in America. So he brought a new idea to the table, an album that was less about whispers in the dark and more about cries for help. He called it What's Going On. It was personal, it was political, it was raw. But when Marvin shared the concept with Berry Gordy, the reaction was ice cold. Gordy thought it was a terrible idea. Too dark, too controversial, not marketable. But Marvin had made up his mind. He dug in his heels and insisted the album be released. He believed in the message. He believed people were ready to hear something real. It wasn't about playing it safe anymore. It was about truth. In 1971, What's Going On hit the shelves, and it hit hard. Listeners were blown away. Critics called it a masterpiece. It became one of the most important records in music history, reshaping not just Marvin's legacy, but the boundaries of what soul music could be. Even Gordy, who was initially skeptical, had to admit the album was a success. Still, the two didn't always agree. Their working relationship was full of tension. Marvin wanted freedom. Gordy wanted control. And even when Marvin proved he could see the bigger picture, that push and pull never really ended. But through all the creative battles, one thing remained: mutual respect. Marvin knew he wouldn't have become a star without Gordy's help. Gordy knew Marvin had a genius that couldn't be boxed in. In the end, Marvin's fight for artistic control wasn't just about music. It was about identity, dignity, and the right to speak your truth. And in doing so, he didn't just make a great album. He changed the soul of Motown forever. Here is the deal. Marvin Gaye's journey was not just about smooth vocals and timeless hits. Behind the scenes, there was tension, drama, and even some outright beef with other artists. He was not shy about calling out what he saw as fake or shallow in the industry. That edge helped fuel his creativity, but also made for some messy moments in his career. Even with those clashes, Marvin kept pushing forward, evolving from Motown's love song, King, into a bold voice tackling real-world issues. His music became a powerful mix of soul, passion, and social commentary that still resonates today. Despite personal struggles and industry battles, Marvin never lost sight of his purpose to make music that mattered. His legacy is a reminder that great art often comes from conflict, growth, and the courage to be authentic. So, while Marvin may have had his share of grudges, it was his honesty and fearlessness that made him a legend. Thanks for watching. If you are inspired by Marvin's story, do not forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more deep dives into music's most unforgettable icons. Catch you in the next one.